Contrary to popular belief, Japan is pretty much an attractive market for many Singaporean companies. I would say that Tokyo would remain the big boy in Japan.
Right.
And it's almost impossible, and I'm sure the Japanese governors would disagree with me, but in my humble opinion, it's almost impossible to topple Tokyo, right, in Japan. But this means that each city would have to find a niche of its own.
Hi everyone, welcome to OneTable 3.0 Niche in Nihon. I'm Leah.
I'm Wincy.
And we're your hosts for today. OneTable 3.0 is a new talk series featuring local Singaporean enterprises and professionals with strong business interests in Japan. In each episode, we'll invite a guest speaker to share what it takes for a homegrown business in sunny Singapore to penetrate into the land of the rising sun. We'll cover topics like go-to-market strategies, business partnerships and mannerisms, and even some culture shocks.
That's right. OneTable 3.0 is proudly brought to you by One&Co, a co-working space by the East Japan Railway Company, also known as JR East Singapore. At OneTable, our mission is to create a platform for innovative businesses and for our community to become a hub that connects the business ecosystems of Japan, Singapore, and Southeast Asia.
And we're actually off to our very first episode, and I'm actually really excited to start this because there's quite a few interesting profiles lined up for our third season of OneTable. And I think a majority of us Singaporeans, we love to visit Japan, and even more so when Japanese products find their way into Singapore, but we don't actually stop to wonder if the reverse is true.
Yeah, I think Singapore may be a very small nation, but our business ecosystems are actually thriving and robust. So for our very first episode, we're very excited to have invited someone who knows the Japanese market very, very well. Today's guest speaker will be sharing about the opportunities and challenges of local businesses who are seeking expansion into Japan.
As developmental partner under Enterprise Singapore, also known as ESG for short, we have with us Marcus today, who is also involved in the Global Innovation Alliance, a joint initiative between ESG and the Economic Developmental Board to connect local companies to overseas businesses and tech communities. So I'm really stoked to get this started. So shall we invite Marcus, who's here with us on OneTable today?
Hi, Marcus.
Hi,
Hello, Marcus.
hi. Thanks for having me.
So maybe, Marcus, you could start off by sharing a bit more on what the Global Innovation Alliance is, how you're involved in the Japan side of things, and maybe your role at ESG as well.
Sure. So I'll start by sharing what the Global Innovation Alliance, or GIA, is. It is really a network where Singapore and overseas partners come together to facilitate the interaction between Singapore startups and companies, as well as foreign-based startups and companies. So what we do is that we identify a number of innovative cities, of which Tokyo, Japan is one of those. And we identify a local partner in that market to help facilitate that interaction and transfer of knowledge and experience. So for Japan, we partner with Live&S, which is really a deep tech innovation platform. And we actually concluded our first program to Japan, and we are right now in the midst of the second batch. So that's quite exciting. Yeah.
Okay, Marcus, can you share about some major considerations for a Singaporean company who is looking to enter into Japan?
Sure. I think there are various reasons why a Singaporean company would consider entering Japan. The first would be Japan is the world's third largest economy and also a developed country, which kind of indicates a high purchasing power. Secondly, the population tend to be relatively homogeneous. That means that if you can sell in one part of Japan, you likely can sell in another part. The third one would be policies in Japan tend to be pro-business. I think government policies, regulations tend to favor businesses. The other reason would be that it is considered a politically stable country, relatively safe. I was in Japan about last year, I think. And even at night when you walk the streets, you still kind of feel safe. You know, there are people around, there are things happening, it's bustling with activities.
Yep.
And lastly would be the focus on R&D. So Japan has traditionally been considered a place where innovation takes place. And I think for a local company that wants to tap on the expertise and innovation in Japan, that would be definitely a place to consider.
Could I just add on slightly to Vince's question as well? Is there any specific challenges that are very Japan, or rather Japan specific in that sense, for local companies looking to enter?
Definitely. So one of the things I struggled when I went to Japan is the language. If you don't speak Japanese, it's almost like you're an outsider. And so for a company looking to break into the Japanese market, it's almost essential that you need to be able to speak Japanese or have somebody on the team that speaks Japanese. So that's one of the biggest hurdle. Most of business transactions are conducted in Japanese. I think legal documents are all in Japanese. So that's one of the biggest challenge for our local companies. Second, it would be maybe less relevant but still relevant, hierarchy. I think there is a sense of hierarchy when it comes to who you speak to, how you speak, how you approach that person. And when you're dealing with the larger Japanese companies, you have to be aware of that hierarchy. And the last one really is about relationships. So in Japan, it's not like you can just go to the C-suite and just have a chat with the C-suite. Cold emails doesn't work, right? But when there is an introduction, I think that helps a lot more. Yeah.
So warm referrals are like key for a local business to actually enter to get connected to the Japan market, I would say.
Yes, that's right. So having the right contacts to point you to the right people, to introduce you to the right folks, definitely open doors.
Okay. Right. So you yourself, you work closely with both players in Japan and Singapore. So could you share on the different types of business partnerships or collaborations that you have observed between local companies and Japanese corporates? Right?
Sure. So actually, contrary to popular belief, Japan is pretty much an attractive market for many Singaporean companies. And we do have a number of Singaporean brands that are already in Japan. Obviously, there are many ways to enter the market. You have franchising model, JVs, partnerships.
Yeah.
But perhaps I will just elaborate on a couple. So the first one is a client-supplier model, where a Singaporean company provides its goods or services to a Japanese company. One example would be vSense. So vSense provides AI-based visual search and image recognition solutions.
Right.
So I think they have partnered with Samsung in Japan. Another one would be a POC model, whereby a Singaporean company collaborates with a Japanese company to test out like a proof of concept.
Right. Yep.
And I think from our first GIA program, the first batch, there were some interesting conversations that came out of that program. And some of it has also led to some of these POCs with Japanese corporates.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
The next one is R&D, whereby a Singaporean company works with a university in Japan or research institute in Japan to conduct R&D together. We haven't seen much yet, but I think this is an exciting area because there are many innovative technologies in Japan. The universities are world acclaimed. And so I think we should probably see more local SMEs going there to tap on some of this expertise and then commercializing it back in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
The last one is, I would say, an investment by Japanese VC into a Singaporean startup. That helps because the Japanese VC instantly get a foot into Southeast Asia. And if also there is synergy, right, with whatever the Singaporean startup is doing, the Japanese VC being in the Japan market can easily bring that startup back to Japan.
Right.
So Marcus, just now you mentioned SMEs and startups, and as we know, they are defined quite differently. What about SMEs who do not fall into the category of a startup? So do you observe any potential opportunities and support for them to enter the Japanese market?
So to answer from the Enterprise Singapore perspective, we actually don't differentiate that much between a startup or an SME. In fact, our mandate is to help Singaporean companies. And whether you're an SME, a startup, or even a large local enterprise, you are a Singaporean company, and it's our mandate to help you. So I don't think there is much differentiation. It is just perhaps the people you're targeting, the clients you're targeting may differ slightly. Let me give you an example. as a startup, you appeal more to Japanese venture capitalists than if you
Right.
are a SME, because they may associate SME with being, you have all this connotation about how SME is like. And as a VC investor, they may not be so interested. But that doesn't mean an SME cannot get a Japanese investor, because a VC investor and a general investor has slightly different objectives and goals.
Right.
So other than targeting your audience, which may differ based on whether you're a startup or SME, I don't think there is much different. In fact, I think our local SMEs may be in a better position to tap on the Japanese market. As I shared previously, so I think the IHLs in Japan, the research institutes tend to be quite strong in their R&D. And as an SME, you tend to have certain cash flow or certain reserves that allow you to, and even network that allows you to commercialize some of this technology. For a startup, you probably are trying to invent that technology. You're trying to sell that technology. But for a SME, you're looking more at commercializing technologies that's out there. So I think, again, depending on who you're targeting in Japan, an SME may actually be a better model.
Okay. Well, that's quite interesting to hear, actually. So then, in that case, whether it's the SME or startup, do you see any specific sectors or industries in Japan that might be more attractive for locals? I'm just going to give an example. Like Singapore and Japan, we both share an aging population. So we understand that Japan is also trying to target how to handle or how to mitigate the problems coming up from the aging population. And we actually do observe startups going over, or startups coming up with ideas and solutions that cater to nursing care, elderly care, so on and so forth. So something like that. So do you see any specific potential markets?
Yeah, so thanks, Leah. Definitely, I think aging population is something that both our country face. And you're right, there is a growth in terms of focus on the elder care and even med tech industries. Maybe I'll just share a few other areas that I think it's good options and potential for our local companies. The first one is the Japanese government, has plans to bring in 60 million foreign visitors by 2030, as evident by the various international events that they have lined up. I think Olympics is one, but because of COVID, it was pushed back. But there are other events such as the World Expo, for example. And so this presents opportunities in the tourism and hospitality sectors. Again, I know COVID is quite a dampener for the tourism and hospitality space, but I don't think this will last perpetually. I think we will recover. And so startups or even companies in this space may be pretty well positioned to tap on the market when everything goes up. The second, I think Japan is also pushing to increase agriculture and infrastructure exports. So this presents opportunity for wholesale trade and third-party infrastructure collaboration. Let me elaborate a bit more. So this is not so much about us going to Japan to provide those solutions. It is a Singaporean company working with a Japanese company to penetrate a third country. And if you look around Singapore, the developing countries, I think there's great opportunities.
Right.
The next area I think is on the tech space, and this is where it gets a little sexy, right? So the Tokyo government has always been interested to attract good startups, especially in the fintech space. I think there is an annual kind of like competition organized by the Tokyo government to bring in good fintech companies into Japan. Singapore, being a fintech hub and a place where there are many fintech companies, could also be well positioned to tap on this trend. And finally, I think other than looking at the sectors, it will be worthwhile to look at Japan as a geographical location. What do I mean? So most startups or companies would only think of Japan as being equal to Tokyo. And that is true to a certain extent, because Tokyo is still where most of the businesses and corporations are positioned.
Right.
But it is also worthwhile to consider areas like Fukuoka, which is presenting itself as a landing site for startups, as well as Osaka, which is strong in the medtech and deep tech space.
So when you talk about how it takes a longer time in Japan, right, to establish a relationship, then would you say that the sales cycle itself is much longer for a company looking to enter Japan as compared to looking to enter, China, or looking to enter in another country of Southeast Asia? Because we have heard from startups that the sales cycle in Japan is particularly long.
I think I would agree. I think China tends to do things a little much quicker. Just going to China today and maybe 1 year later, you would see that even infrastructure changes have moved so fast. I think because of COVID, there was a video that was circulating about how China built a hospital in a few days, right? So that's the speed of how China works. Very fast. But in Japan, I think it's a little more longer. It's a little more deliberate. But perhaps the relationship in Japan would go much deeper because I think when they trust you, they would really trust you unless you do something that breaks that trust. And so I think if you're looking for longevity in the Japanese market, then yes, the sales cycle may be longer, but you probably will be guaranteed of longevity in the market.
Right.
Would you like to share a personal word of advice for businesses who are wishing to break into Japan?
I will go back to some of the challenges that we talked about earlier. I think the first is language and local support. So definitely, we all know Japanese is the working language. That's how they communicate. And so a Singaporean startup looking to enter the market must have somebody on the team that speaks Japanese, or you must have a local who is on your team. So I think going in with no ability to speak Japanese puts you at a disadvantage. So that's one. Secondly, it goes back to relationships, right? Cold calls tend to be neglected or ignored, and having a warm introduction helps. I think that's where Enterprise Singapore comes in, trying to blow my organization's trumpet. But I would say that we are connected to both the government as well as the private sector. And in fact, we have helped many of our local companies penetrate the Japan market because of various introductions that we can facilitate. But that being said, it doesn't mean we know everyone. But through our partners in Japan, we are able to also facilitate that connection. Thirdly, we have to be patient. So most deals in Japan takes a long time. It could take up to a year before a deal is signed. And that's, I guess, how it's like with relationships. We shouldn't jump into relationships too quickly, both personal and professional. And I think the Japanese takes relationships quite seriously. And hence, when we're trying to enter the market, let's not be too quick to force a deal or force a contract. I think we have to take time to build that relationship and build that contract and that trust.
Well, that is actually all the time we have today, but thank you for joining us, Marcus, and sharing with us what some of the Swiss startups and SMEs can look out for when considering to enter the Japanese market.
And if you have any questions or shout-outs for Marcus, do leave us a note in the comment section. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again at the next episode of OneTable 3.0 Niche in Nihon. Bye!
Bye! Thanks for having me.